guys, welcome back. It's Biggs. Now, today I have something a little bit different. I know I say that all the time, but today's a little bit different. I've got some orchids coming in today. Today, maybe possibly tomorrow. And some of them are epiphytic orchids. Now, if you remember from the moth orchid presentation I gave you guys earlier, epiphytic orchids are orchids that actually live on other trees. So because these are epiphytic orchids, I like to actually mount them. Instead of putting them in pots and having rows and rows of pots, I like to put them in and actually mount them on something. Now, a lot of people tend to use cork bark because it's readily available. You can get it at any pet store. They use them for lizards and stuff. They're easy to sterilize. They're easy to keep clean for reptiles, but it's also costly. I live in the country. I got stuff all around me. So a little bit of using my eyes, a little bit of thinking. One of these, I can get all the stuff I'm ever going to need to mount nice, beautiful orchids in a nice natural setting. Okay, so I've gone out in the woods and stuff in a bit of my backyard here, and I've cut down one branch off of a nice live oak tree. The reason I use oak is oak has that nice, very heavy, coarse bark. It's got lots of little fissures in the bark and stuff, so the roots of the orchids have something to really strongly adhere to. Now I'm going to take that home. It's only one branch, so it's no problem. It doesn't hurt the tree whatsoever. But I'm going to take this home, and I'm going to cut these into small little mounts of different sizes, and then I'm going to rip it down the middle, so they're all going to be half circles with a flat back, and then I mount a little tiny hook, and I've got some beautiful mounts for many, many years of use for orchids. Now another thing is, if you're out in the woods and you're using your eyes, you can often see on the forest floor growing on dead, decaying trees that have fallen, sometimes on rocks and stuff like that, nice, soft, spongy mosses. And these types of mosses, these type of carpet mosses and stuff, are awesome because you can use these as the pads of which are mounted onto the tree, and then actually put your orchid onto this, and it'll be a good source for catching nutrients. It'll also be a good source for obtaining and holding moisture around the roots of the plants. And because they're living mosses, I'm going to put these into some little Tupperwares until they're ready to go. Put them in my fish room under a little bit of light and keep them nice and moist using RO water, reverse osmosis water, and I can probably keep them alive. And then when I transfer the orchids to them and transfer them into the vivarium for the orchids, these things will be live and living mosses. So they're just going to contribute to nature in that environment, but they're also going to have all sorts of beneficial bacteria and living little tiny organisms and stuff in here that'll keep the environment a lot cleaner and also help the area around the roots a lot better. So another nice, beautiful thing found on my property. So today, I have some bare root little restrepias. This is one species that naturally came apart, so I've got two. I've got the younger growth and I got the older growth. They may look a little bit different, but the newer growth has got the nice bright green leaves. And it's nice that they divided because I'm going to mount them, and I'm going to mount them on the same mount, but I'm going to mount them a little bit apart, so it's going to establish and take over and grow into a much larger column. This species happens to be Restrepia condorensis.
Comes from Ecuador. Beautiful little species. So to mount my orchid today, I've got my little orchid thing ready to go. I got my 2 little orchids. I've selected some little pieces of nice green moss. I'll put my tag to the side. One thing I forgot to mention, you guys know it all too well. Where am I? I'm at home, you know that. You've seen the other videos, but not only am I at home, I'm in my wife's kitchen. So again, if you're going to be in your wife's kitchen, and you're not normally in your wife's kitchen, you might want to get your permission slip to use the kitchen. I got my permission slip, still says signed wife, still no date, so I can still use my permission slip to use the kitchen when the wife's not in the kitchen. Very, very important to maintain the harmony in the home that you have husband, wife, permission slip, I'm covered. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to add a bit of water. The water that I use for my orchids, because I live in the country, all of our water that we have here comes out of a well. And our water is extremely hard, extremely high in iron, and then any of the water that comes into the home goes through a water softening system, which uses a salt mineral that breaks it down and softens the water and rinses out the hardness. The only problem is neither the softened water nor the well water is really good for plants. So what I do for the plants and the fish, as you guys know, is I make about 180 gallons of reverse osmosis water every single day. So I always fill up my tank downstairs. I use it for watering plants. I use it for the shrimps. I use it for the freshwater fish. I use it for the planted tanks. I use it for a myriad of different uses and stuff. But today, because we're dealing with orchids that come from like a cloud forest, we're gonna use RO water. By throwing them in the water and letting them sit in the water a little bit, it's just gonna kind of rehydrate the roots before we go and plant them, because they are bare root. I took them off a mount earlier and stuff, and they just need something a little bit better. So we're gonna use this nice piece here with these nice beautiful fissures. I might use a little bit of this long fibered sphagnum moss and just kind of figure out where we want to mount them on here. Just kind of get a visual of what it wants to look like. So to do the mounting, I've taken a bunch of the small live moss that I had ready to go, and I've just kind of pressed it into the fissures of the bark in the areas where I'm planning on putting these 2 little Restrepia plants. This will carry a nice little base for the roots to adhere to, and also provide a nice moisture base. Now we were talking about taking this original, the big one, the older one, and mounting it kind of right here in amongst that fissure there. And it fits really, really well. We'll spread the roots out a little bit. And then we're going to take another little piece of this moss, and it'll act basically as a pad. And it's going to go right over the top of that. And then we're going to tie that on using some monofilament fishing line. Now, the fishing line is kind of irrelevant. You can use acrylic yarn, you could use string, whatever you probably have around the house will probably work. I like monofilament fishing line. One, it's totally invisible, which makes it a bit of a challenge to see when you're trying to work with it as you get a little bit older, like myself. But once the plant is adhered really, really nicely, this monofilament line can be removed. So just a couple of wraps. I'm going to tie it up in the back. And it's really not more complicated than that. As you get older, you find that some of these little lines, maybe I should have used string, or I should have used yarn, maybe I should have used something neon blue, because trying to see this is posing to be a bit of a challenge. Using my third hand, which is my teeth. So you can see it's mounted pretty well. Gives it a nice profile. You can see the little old inflorescences on the species. Here's a nice new leaf coming here. You'll be ready to mount. Now, because I have the other one there, the little junior plant with it, I'm going to tuck that one nicely inside here, and it's going to go as well. And we're going to do the same thing with that one. We're just going to cover it with a little pad of the green living moss. And same thing as before. I don't think it matters on using the fishing line, the monofilament line, as to the pound weight. You know, we're not trying to reel in a fish here. We're just trying to tie on a little tiny orchid. So whatever you have available, I'm sure will work fine. There you have it. Pretty straightforward, easy to do, nice and clean, looks beautiful, looks nice and natural. You hang nice on a wall. The only last step is what I will do is because I don't like losing my tags, but especially when I deal specifically in species orchids, is I'm going to go and take a soldering iron or a hot nail or something and just put a little hole in here, but a hole that's heated, so it acts like a reinforced, almost like one of those things you used to put on your loose leaf. It makes it a nice solid hole. And then I'm going to tie it up and put it on the back so I won't lose it. But just for now, I'm just going to tuck it in amongst the string, because in a month or two, once this plant is recovered and adhered and done really well, you could theoretically cut off all the monofilament fishing line and just make it to take it all off, and it'll be good to go. That is mounting an orchid on things you found in your backyard. Thanks, guys.